I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Tuesday, February the 19th, where these stocker cattle have taken charge now in the market. It's the hottest thing going by far. I realize we've still got frozen tundra in much of the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and through the northern parts of our country about everywhere, but I tell you what, everybody knows that we're going to have tons of grazing. We're going to have graze out wheat, we're going to have early grass. Going to be a lot of cheap gain out there to turn cattle out, and people start getting excited about spring. They get excited about buying some stocker cattle to turn out about this time of the year. It's also the time of the year where people start maybe second guessing a little bit of their program. Some of these guys trying to save these baby calves that are dropping up in the upper Midwest, or wishing maybe they'd have waited another 30 days before they turned their bull out, but they wanted to have those calves get as big as they can by the time they sell them, but starting to second guess themselves a little bit there. It's also the time of year that we start seeing more people wishing that they had fall calved, and I am a big proponent of that, and I know a lot of you guys don't understand that, and you just don't think you could turn your operation into that, and I understand in certain regions you can't, but in a lot of regions you can. If you live in Missouri or Arkansas or Kentucky or out that way where the weather, you get all seasons, but the weather is more moderate, you can fall calf, and you should fall calf. If we had more people fall calf, we wouldn't have the big webs and flows of the market so much. We wouldn't have near the volatility. We would have the adequate amount of demand for the adequate amount of supply. But we are going to run out of these lightweight cattle. Right now it's the calves, and it's been the calves since the first of the year that everybody's crazy about. But here in just a few weeks, and we starting to get a little more into springtime type weather, it's going to be your stocker type cattle, and not just calves. It's going to be calf weight yearlings and true stocker cattle that's been rough wintered. They're thin, they look kind of tough and everything, and they're going to bring a huge premium, and it'll be more than enough to make up for what they lack in weight, because everybody's going to want those cattle to turn out on grass. But I guarantee you the stockers is where it's at. We're going to talk about that a lot more when we get into the feeder cattle section. But didn't have any board because it was President's Day, so couldn't get hurt there. But the board is not going to be impressed with last week's $125 fat cattle trade. It mostly happened after the board closed on Friday. If you remember, on Friday, your nearby feeder cattle were down hard, and probably not going to be a happy Tuesday when the board opens, and it's usually a Monday it does it. Just waited a day later to do it. But your weighted average on last week's fat cattle trade on 79,300 head, just a few more than that prior week where we had that incomplete trade, and there was 76,000 week before. Compare those two figures to the same week a year ago, 127,800 head. And this is the time of year your backers are want to get their hands on some supplies of cattle, as many as they can get. They want to ramp up the kills. They're making good money. They know that their end product, their cutout values are going to be on the rise, and they want to have plenty of product on hand to sell both out front and to fill their current needs. And so we've got an opportunity to gain quite a bit of market position here if we can just get things lined up again, and then not get too greedy like we did 2 weeks ago. But on this past week's trade, which we just kind of had to put our head down and just take what they gave us, which was 125, but you had live sales in the 5 area from 122 all the way up to 127, but your weighted average on last week's live steers was 124.96, right at 125. That was down just 2 cents from the weighted average from the previous week on live steers. Dressed cattle sold from 198 to 204. Your weighted average on dressed steers was $199.92, so basically almost everything at $200, and that was actually 4 cents higher than the previous week. Nationwide, 101,300 head sold, negotiated cash and only 6.5% of those cattle, or just over 6,700, sold for the 15 to 30 day delivery. So that's good. We're not selling a lot of those cattle to get things set up for a fall, even though your packers would like to buy some cattle out front there in that window, but not getting a lot of them bought. However, and I've told you for the past several weeks, your contracts, your forward contracts, are a lot heavier. And both March and April, fat cattle delivery contracts for March and April are both 20,000 or more than 20,000 head above what they were for all of last year for March and April. So that's the way they're getting their hands on more cattle that they don't already have signed up for a formula deal, but they're getting them with previous contracts and not necessarily buying them just out front on the cash basis there. But let's look at your feeder cattle markets. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central late on Monday sitting at 140.147, down just 6 cents. So you could say pretty much steady on feeder cattle on the 7-day moving average. Of course, it didn't move that whole index figure very much. But look at some of your sales on Monday. Oklahoma City had 9,100 heads, so you can tell that things are getting a little better there as far as getting cattle out and the roads and things like that, even though it's been awful wet and dreary there for the last several weeks. But 9,100 is a good run for Oklahoma National Stockyards. Your feeders steady to $3 lower, except some of your lighter weight feeder cattle, your 6 to 650 weight steers and your 650 to 700 pound heifers, they call $2 higher. Steer calves steady to $5 higher, and they've been higher every week here basically since the first of the year because people just pushing and pushing and pushing on buying some cattle to turn out this spring. And your heifers were higher too, that much, except for your 450 to 650 pound heifers, and they were kind of steady to $1 lower. But a lot of times it's hard to sell one of those middleweight heifers, and especially if one of them tends to be fleshy. But look at some quotes that come on Cattle Market Central from National Livestock Commission there, and just kind of want to show you the disparage between how much demand there is for your lightweight grazing cattle and how much lighter it is for your feeding type cattle. But there at Oklahoma City with National's firm, they had 77 head of 515 pound steer calves, bring 182 and a quarter. That's a whale of a price there on some lightweight turnout cattle. Now that figures up to me $940 a head. That's pretty spendy. Now look at some feeding steers. 102 head of 791. These aren't odds. This is a big string of cattle. 102 head weighed 791 at 133. So they bring 1052 a head. Anyway, that's 276 pounds of cattle on one head there for $112 by the head. So you break that down, that's about $40.50 a hundred. I realize your gains are cheap, but that doesn't include any expenses at all. And it's just that everybody wants lightweight cattle, and there's just not a big drive on these feeding type cattle because the conditions in the feedlots are still rough and muddy, and it's still cold and miserable out there in those feedlots. I haven't had a good chance to really get them scraped out and get them back in good shape since all that mud and bad weather and everything, and it's just they can't get excited about it. But you look at some other markets. Joplin Regional Stockyards, 4,500 head, about half what Oklahoma City had. Feeders there were steady. Calves $2 to $6 higher. I tell you what, these turnout cattle is just where it's at. But I want to give you several individual quotes on some feeding cattle. They start out really good and then just get progressively higher. But Elgin Livestock Sales in Elgin, Nebraska had a load of cattle there. 53 head of steers weighed 715 pounds at 153.5. Didn't see very many in the 50s weighing in the 7s, guys. But then you get a little higher than that. Russell, Iowa, every Monday having good sales there. You can watch them on DV Auction. 71 head of 701 pound steers in Russell, Iowa bring 159 and a quarter. Wow. But that all kind of pales in comparison to Platte Valley Livestock in Gering, Nebraska. I was there just the other night and ate supper, and it was cold. 146 head of black baldy steers, weighed 666 at $175. And that's your feeder flash for Tuesday.